Welcome back to the Michael Imhotep Show on the Empowerment Radio Network, where knowledge is power. All right, we want to welcome everybody to the second hour of tonight's show. We have to give a shout out to some of our affiliate radio stations that broadcast the Michael Imhotep Show. WCBQ 1340 AM in Oxford, North, WHNC 890 AM in Henderson, North Carolina, WBOK 1230 AM in New Orleans, Louisiana, WOLB 1010 AM in Baltimore, Maryland. You can also listen to the show by downloading the TuneIn Radio app to your Android phone, your iPhone, your BlackBerry, your tablet, and search for Empowerment Radio Network, or go to TuneIn.com and search for Empowerment Radio Network. All right, on the line we have Professor James Small. You've heard him on the Michael Imhotep Show before. You may have seen him in the documentary. Okay, we have him calling back in. Okay, you may have seen him in the documentary Hidden Colors 2, the Triumph of Melanin. You may have heard him on the before on the Michael Imhotep Show. He has taught for a number of years at the college level. He's taught courses dealing with Pan-African studies, Pan-Africanism. He's taught for over 15 years at the City University of New York, including 13 years at the City College of New York's Black Studies Department, 13 of those years also serving as an administrator, and 2 years at New York City Technical College. Now, Professor Small has also taught courses on Pan-Africanism, Malcolm X, and on comparative religions, which included several African spiritual systems titled African Religion and Survival, and 2 years at New York City Technical College teaching the course African Folklore and Religion. Okay. All right. And okay, I know we're trying to get him back on the line. Okay. So we'll have him on in a few minutes. Okay, all right. They're trying to get him back on the line. Okay, good. Now, he's also taught both and in Africa. He's also taught crime in urban community and urban crisis and issues. Now, Professor James Small has been a member of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, better known as ASCAC. Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations for 14 years. He has served as president of ASCAC Eastern Region for 2 years, where he worked and studied with Dr. John Henrik Clark, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, Dr. Asa Hilliard, Dr. Wade Nobles, Dr. Amos Wilson, and Dr. Francis Cress Wilson, just to name a few. And I've interviewed Dr. Jeffries is one of my teachers. Dr. John Henry Clark was a teacher to Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, Booker T. Coleman, who we had on last night. Professor Kaba Kamene is one of my teachers. Also, Professor James Small is another one of my teachers as well. I've interviewed Dr. Francis Cress Wilson. So we're waiting on him to call back in. In the meantime, I want to let you know that coming up tomorrow, Friday, February 6th, at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, they are doing the a screening of the documentary 500 Years Later. Now, this is part of ASALA, the ASALA Week, Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and they're celebrating Woodson Week, Dr. Carter G. Woodson Week. And the Association for the Study of African American Life and History was the organization that he helped co-found. Now, this screening is taking place 6 p.m. to about 8 p.m. 500 Years Later is a critically acclaimed, multi-award winning, compelling, and timeless journey filmed on 5 continents. It's infused with the spirit and music of liberation. 500 Years Later chronicles the struggle of a people who have fought and continue to essential human right, self-determination. 500 years later, after the onset of the African Holocaust of enslavement and colonialism, Africans and people of African descent are struggling for basic freedoms. Why is this? Okay. Now, there'll be a questions and answers session afterwards, and I'm on that panel for questions and answers. So definitely come on out. It's a free event. Bring the family. There'll be vendors there also. Be sure to visit the vendor table of the African History Network as well. And come on, bring pen and pad to take notes, ask questions. I'm on the panel along with Malika Kinney. Malika Kinney is the co-founder of the Black Food Security Network. He's also the co-founder of Insuroma Institute as well. So it's going to be a good time. And you're going to learn a lot. Friday, February 6th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. We just posted this information on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. We're going to put it on our website. It'll be in the email newsletter that goes out tomorrow, okay, Friday. And very quickly, we're going to go to Professor Small in just a second here. But Saturday at the Charles H. Wright Museum, February 7th, 12 noon to 8 p.m., there will be the first annual African World Bazaar. Now, this African World Bazaar is a unique marketplace drawing on influences from African diaspora and beyond, from textile garments to handsmith, jewelry, and handmade organic jams. African World Bazaar is bound to offer something special for everyone. Guests will also enjoy live performances, youth activities, arts and crafts demonstrations, and more. Okay, we're going to post this on our fan page also, The African History Network. This is taking place Saturday, February 7th at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. It's a free event. I'll be there as well. We'll have a vendor table, the African History Network also. So check that out as well. Okay, on the line we have Professor James Small. We want to welcome him to the Hotep Show. How you doing, Professor Small? Hotep.
Hotep, Brother Michael. I'm nursing a cold. You know, I was hanging out.
Yes.
In the Midwest all weekend from airport to airport trying to get home.
Yes, I understand.
But everything else is good.
That's good. That's good, brother. Well, look, it's good to have you on. Always good to talk to you. I talked to you yesterday and earlier today. And I talked to Professor Griff Tuesday night. And you and Professor Griff are doing a double lecture coming up Saturday, February 14th in Atlanta. Yep. And you're going to deal with African spirituality. And tonight we wanted to talk about African spirituality, awakening the God within. And because that's some of what you're going to talk about. And it's we've talked about this before, but it's extremely important to deal with this subject matter. And we're coming up on a break in a minute, but I want introduction. But why is something like this? Well, first of all, let's approach it this way. What is African spirituality? Because usually when we hear about religion, we hear about Christianity, Islam, Judaism, but we don't hear about African spirituality. What is that?
Well, African spirituality is the understanding of nature and humans' relationship to nature and the cosmos, and the African ancestors' interpretation of the principles that govern that relationship. Out of this fundamental understanding evolved Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Okay, and you talk about how Judaism, Christianity, Islam took fragments from the periphery.
Fragments from the periphery of the African spiritual system.
Yes, okay. So when we deal with African spirituality, okay, we're about to go to break. We come back. We want to talk about when we deal with African spirituality, what are some of the most popular African spiritual systems and among which people are they practiced? We're going to get into this on the other side of the break. Okay, so just stand by. Welcome back to the Michael Imhotep Show on the Empowerment Radio Network, where knowledge is power. All right, we're speaking with Professor James Small, and we're talking about African spirituality, awakening the God. All right, Professor Small, right before the break, you gave us a good, concise overview of what African spirituality is, or a definition of what African spirituality is. And one of the questions I had right before the break was, what are some of the most popular African spiritual systems, and what are their names, and which people are they practiced by?
Yeah, and in North America, we find a lot of people who are practicing the Yoruba tradition, or the African spiritual system as the Yoruba practice it. There's no such thing as a Yoruba religion, or a Yoruba spiritual system. A religion is a tool of spirituality, so every people will develop the religion to interpret their spirituality to themselves. And so the Yoruba practice is heavily used The Yoruba people live in West Africa, in what is now Nigeria. Also, we practice heavily. You see people practicing the Akan tradition. The Akans are people living, or in Benin, we see them practicing the Voodoo tradition. And Benin is also in West Africa, bordering on Nigeria. We'll also see the Voodoo tradition practiced in Haiti. We'll see it practiced in New Orleans and other parts of southern Mississippi and Louisiana. We'll see the Candomblé tradition practiced in Brazil.
Okay. And pronounce that again, Candomblé. Pronounce that again.
Candomblé.
Okay, Candomblé. Yes.
Candomblé.
Yes.
And then there's Lucomé. That's what they call the tradition, one of the tradition practiced in Cuba. And Santeria is the tradition practiced in Puerto Rico by Africans there. All of them are practicing the very same system, the very same spiritual system, following the very same cosmology and the very same laws of nature and relationship to nature. And how each culture uses religion as a tool to interpret that spirituality to themselves. Right. So if we look at the Yoruba, we'll see people who are very familiar with that one in North America, where they talk about the Orishas. And so the Orishas are the gods, but no, there's no African word calling the Orishas gods. They are forces in nature. And these forces in nature, which Western science calls some of them the laws of nature, these forces in nature, ancient Africans related to them just as we relate to the laws of nature today. How they function, how they affect us, how we affect them, how we impact on them, how they impact on us. And the idea is, how do you keep harmony between you and all of the aspects of nature that you're able to, and how do you keep harmony between you and the cosmology, the cosmos, the things above the earth that affects you every day, and you affect them with your thoughts, with your actions, and your behavior. And we're talking about matter and energy interacting with each other. But you teach this through allegory and through folklore and through metaphor, as well as rituals and ceremonies and celebrations that involving dancing and music. It involves mastering the science of understanding herbology and the natural medicine that goes in the ecology, and how to apply that medically to the lives of the people in the community you're living in. And that the Africans saw medicine as being a spiritual thing, not just a scientific thing. And so you didn't separate your science from your spirituality. Your spirituality and your science is what made it, and was your understanding of science that makes up your reality. So I often say spirituality is reality. It's being conscious of the moment you're living in, and being guided by the wisdom of our collective ancestors and the divine laws of nature. Right. Now, how this plays out in what we call religion, I'll give you an example. Okay. See, I'm a priest of Oya. Oya is considered to be an Orisha, which some people call a god, but there is no god called Oya. Orisha is a force of nature. In the Yoruba language, you're referring to something that is a force, a phenomena, a function in nature that has multiple ways of expressing itself. One of the ways the force we call Oya expresses itself, it expresses itself as change and process. So if I want to tell us, I want to do a metaphor about Oya, I would have to use something that represents change. So I will describe Oya as the wind, because the wind represents change. It blows away the stale, it brings in the new. And so the metaphor in the Yoruba culture about Oya, one of the metaphors is how she saves the king, Shango. Shango, who's a king, represents the aspect of royalty in the human character, represents the courage to change yourself to a higher spirit, a better person. But once you get the courage to change yourself, that courage must do what? It must marry change. So Shango, the courage, the awareness of the courage within a human consciousness to want to change itself must marry change in process in that same human being's consciousness to go to the next step. And then now that Shango and Oya is married, the need for change, marrying change, then in the metaphor, the beautiful woman who represents change, called Oya, has to marry the god of war, the god of iron, Ogun. Why? Because Ogun represents transformation. You know, you get iron, you take a rock, and you put it in the fire, and you burn out the impurities, and you come with iron or steel. Well, that's the result of transformation. So the need for change, Shango, marries change in process, Oya, who then in turn becomes polyandrous and marries transformation as a result of the change, which is called Ogun. You understand what I just said?
Yes, yes.
So when you understand how, you remember most people were not literate in the way we are literate today.
Right.
And read language. Very few people in the inner circle did that. But they were literate in terms of the cultural tools that were used to teach fundamental ideas, principles, and concepts. And that's what metaphor and allegory and folklore were used to do. And that's where dance and drama and music comes in to help teach these concepts. So everyone in the society had an equal understanding of the fundamental laws of science, of the laws of nature, of an understanding the cosmos, astrology, and astrology's knowledge and relationship to everything we did here on Earth. When you put all of that together, which should be called African sacred science, then you're talking about African spirituality or religiosity.
Okay, okay. How should most African Americans are of a Christian persuasion? So how should
we're gonna have to stop saying Christian persuasion. Let's stop saying European Christian persuasion.
Okay, European Christian. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because people will try to escape out of that and say, well, yeah, you know, we had Christians and Africans. Yes, most enslaved Africans who came to America were either Christians or Muslims before they were captured and enslaved. But most Africans in Africa who were enslaved, who were Christians or Muslims, still practice their traditional system as well. Since we invented Christianity and Islam at a periphery of our society where we're being invaded by outsiders in the area we now call Egypt or Northeast Africa. And so the very people that we had converted to that came back, and for 1,500 years before the transatlantic slave trade, through wars and murder and genocide, carried on the Trans-Sahara slave trade and the Indian Ocean slave trade. These were the Arabs and Turkish Muslims who were enslaving and murdering and practicing genocide on Africans before Christopher Columbus was born. And so that in the course of that, millions of us became Muslims. And even before we became Muslims, millions of us were Christians. Some of the oldest Christian churches in the world, one of the 10 oldest Christian churches in the world is in Ethiopia.
Right. And how far does that back up?
The ruins of two of the 15 oldest churches is in the Sudan. So we were practicing a form of Christianity. Right. Before there was Christianity in England or France or Germany.
Right. The one in Ethiopia, how far back does that go? The Christian church in Ethiopia?
Yeah, it goes back to the 5th century. 5th century. Yes, AD.
Or BC. Okay.
What we see in Ethiopia, let's not confuse it, that's the Byzantine church that comes out of Turkey. But that time Turkey was a multi-ethnic, black, Asiatic mixed community. That is the church that produced the church in Ethiopia. But the Ethiopian gave it its own character by incorporating its ancient Egyptian aspects into it.
Okay, hold on. I got to take a quick break. Okay, hold on just a second, Professor Small. We'll continue this on the other side of the break, okay? All right, you listen to the Michael Imhotep Show on the Empowerment Radio Network, where knowledge is power. You can give us a call, 888. Welcome back to the Michael Imhotep Show on the Empowerment Radio Network, where knowledge is power. Everything is everything. All right, that's some Lauryn Hill for you. Okay, we're speaking with Professor James Small. You've seen him in Hidden Colors 2, The Triumph of Melanin. You've heard him on the Michael Imhotep show before, in the African History Network show. He's very, very knowledgeable brother. And right before the break, we were talking about African spirituality. We were talking about an original form of Christianity, if you want to put it that way. So Professor Small, right before the break, you were making a distinction between the Christianity that Africans practice historically and the Christianity that was imposed upon us by Europeans. And go ahead and finish with the point you were making before the break.
Yes, sir. The Christianity that we are practicing now was born in France and England. It has very little to do with the early Christian church, the church that we call the Byzantine church, which is born before the Catholic church. Okay? It is not that Byzantine church which is put together by African minds. And the last pope said when he was in Cameroon in 2009 that of the 10 scholars that wrote the original theology of the church, 7 were Africans. This is the Pope saying this. And so the church as we knew it in the Byzantine, and we call it the Byzantine kingdom, but people don't realize that the Byzantine rulership was the rulership of the first Christian church. And out of the Catholic Church will be created as a counter to that. Today the Byzantine church is called the Eastern Orthodox.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But they've lost much of their ancient tradition. But the Ethiopian and the Egyptian Coptic Church has, to this day, the character of the original church, out of which all other aspects of Christianity evolved. And so many Africans who came to this country as enslaved Africans came out of those traditions, out of the tradition of Ethiopia, out of the tradition, the Christian tradition in Sudan, out of the Islamic tradition of the Fatimite dynasty out of West Africa, which is quite different from the Turkish Sunni Shia phenomena we see today. And so, but all of these people at the same time, and you will find it's going on right now. If you go to Ghana and you go to a mosque and you see an imam, the odds are almost 10 to 1 that that imam is also a traditional spiritual leader. You understand?
So you're saying, even though you're saying in addition to practicing Islam, he's also practicing a traditional African spiritual system. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Because they're viewing it quite differently from the way we're doing it. They're viewing Islam and Christianity as simply a modernized aspect of their tradition.
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah, that's
because Islam and Christianity only deals with a historical phenomenon that takes place in Egypt and in what we call the Middle East, Saudi Arabia. That we call Christianity, everything we call Islam, everything we call Judaism takes place in the northern part of Egypt, in the area we call Israeli Palestine, and in the Red Sea shores of what is called Saudi Arabia. The history of those three religions take place there, and Africans are trying to free themselves. With Judaism, they're trying to free themselves from the control of the Hyksos. With Christianity, it comes as a result of a resistance movement of African spirituality trying to free themselves from the domination of the Roman and the Greek descendants. And Islam will come as again to free itself from the domination of the Romans and other Europeans who had colonized and settled that area. So the three religions, we call the three Western religions, really started out as African spiritual liberation movements that evolved into religion when Westerners got hold of the concept and used it to help raise. Is that clear enough?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, look, we have... go ahead.
No, then when you go back to African...
we're going to... You said go back to what now?
When you go back to African spirituality, then you're talking about reality. how human beings saw themselves in relationship to everything else that existed, including the divinity out of which African says all things evolved. Our first ancestor is God itself.
Okay. Look, we have a caller. Let's go to the caller quickly here. Caller, welcome to the Michael Imhotep Show. Tell us your name, where you're calling from. Do we have the caller? Okay, we lost them. Okay, let me know what's going on with the caller. Okay, all right. Now let me ask you a question here. From my understanding, from my research and talking to various scholars, of those Africans who were brought here to what we call the United States during the transatlantic slave trade, is it accurate to say, even though some of them were Christian, is it accurate to say the majority of them were Muslims?
No, the majority were not Muslims. The majority were traditional African spiritualists.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Yeah.
The overwhelming majority were people who practice their traditional spiritual relationship to the rest of the universe and nature.
Okay. Yeah.
And,
because
I got to say it like that, because when we try to talk about it like a religion, spirituality is not a religion. Religion is a tool of spirituality. Spiritual of religion. And the religion that we are practicing now, the theology that we are practicing now, called Christianity, is not the same theology that was a part of the way of life of the Africans who were captured and brought here.
Okay. And that's what I thought, because I know, and oftentimes that part is left out, that about the Africans who practice traditional African spiritual systems as well. So the majority
of enslaved Africans practice traditional African spiritual tradition. The overwhelming majority. And even those who practice what we're calling Christianity or Islam also practice African spiritual tradition and still do that the same way till this day. I put in at least 4 or 5 months a year in Africa for most of the last 30 years, each year, and have friends in every aspect of the continent and in every aspect of the cultural tradition. And when I go down with my brothers up in Sekandi and other places, and we do Ramadan, but they do the spiritual system too. My spiritual leader, the priest that I go to have my reading done and to have certain special things done on my behalf, he's also an imam of a major Muslim community. He's an imam, and he's also a spiritual leader, and they see no contradiction in that. They're not caught up in the European, Arab, Turkish Sharia, which has nothing to do with African reality. You know?
Right. So they'll practice Islam and then also practice traditional African spiritual systems, and don't see a contradiction in the two of them.
The Islam of the Prophet Muhammad has nothing to do with the Turkish, European Sharia.
Okay, you're dealing with a different Islam. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And I'm speaking as a person who spent 18 years as an imam and went to Mecca twice before life.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. Right. So that's why we have to have that clarification. Okay. All right. Look, we're coming up on a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about this some more. So just stand by. Okay. Listen to the Michael Imhotep Show on the Empowerment Radio Network, where knowledge is power. If you have a question or comment, give us a call, 888-669-2281. 888-669-2281. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the Michael Imhotep Show on the Empowerment Radio Network. All right, we're speaking with Professor James Small, and we're talking about African spirituality, awakening the God within. I want to remind you that Saturday, February 14th, 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. in Atlanta, Georgia, Professor James Small will be doing a double presentation. It will be Professor James Small and Professor Griff of the legendary hip-hop group Public Enemy. It will be at Vickers at 838 Cascade Avenue, Southwest Atlanta, Georgia. For more information and to get tickets, you can go to the.connection.net. the.connection.net. Also, you can call Patricia Patton at 323-929-24, 323-929-7724. You can call Professor Griff at 678-557-2919, 678-557-2919. Tickets in advance online are $20. For students with ID is $15. For children 12 to 17, $10. At the door purchases, general admission is $25. Students with ID, $20. Children ages 12 to 17, $10. It's a double presentation. Professor Small will deal with African spirituality, and Professor Griff will deal with the God frequency. So you don't want to miss this. I'll be there as well. The African History Network will be in the house. I'll be there. Be sure to visit the vendor table of the African History Network at this event also. We have this on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. We'll put it on our website also. We should have it up on the website tomorrow. Okay, let's go back to Professor Small. Professor Small, you still there? Okay, all right, look, we have a caller on line 9. Let's try to get this call in. Caller, welcome to the Michael Imhotep Show. How you doing tonight? Tell us your name, where you're calling from. Caller, are you there? Line 9? Can we get the call on line 9? If you're on the cell phone, hit the mute button because we can't hear you. Okay. Okay, the call. Okay, they're shy. They hung up. Okay. All right. Now, now let me ask you a question. You and I have talked about this before. When you talked about the Moors and you talked about the Turks in Morocco. Okay. When we deal with that, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1786, with Morocco, dealing with Morocco, who was in power there and who was that treaty with?
Treaty was with the Turks. The Turks took over the Ottoman Turks took over the system from the Arab world in the 10th century, and by the 14th century, it was the white Muslim, the Ottoman Turks, that helped destroy the black Moorish rule of Spain. And we don't study history, and we just take labels. Right. Morocco, you know, right now, the people in Morocco who rule, you still got black people living in Morocco. And the word Moor is simply the Romanization, the anglicization of the Romanization of the Greek word for black. Why is that so complicated? And nobody in Africa called themselves a Moor. Right. White folks called us that.
Right.
You know? And we need to stop trying to find ways to separate ourselves from the rest of the black folks. That's why we're in trouble. Right. You know, Moors is just a European way of saying black.
Right. It comes from Moros, the Greek
so
Moros.
The treaty was not signed with the black folks. The treaty was signed with the Turkish Ottoman Empire.
Because we had lost power then.
Until the First World War.
Right. Because we were out of power in Morocco.
Right. Most of the people who lived in Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Libya, the original African people, they now live in parts of Mauritania, in Senegal, in Mali, in Niger, in Gambia. Those people got pushed down by the invading white people, who we are calling Arabs. They're not even Arabs. These are Eastern European Serbs and Tunics and Turks from the Caucasus Mountains. They took over the Islamic system as early as the 8th century. They were forced to share leadership in North Africa with the black folks, who the white folks write about as Moors, because they wanted to those black folks from the black folks they were enslaving in America. So in their literature, we get to this term Moors. You don't get that from any African literature.
Right, and that became a general term. That became a general term.
It's simply a European word for black. It has its roots in Greece and Rome.
Right. Right.
And the Moors is just the anglicization of the Roman word for black.
Right.
If we can get that piece straight, we can start looking at the history and make sense of it. Right now, we're talking like there was some mystical black folks named Moors who got some special relationship with the white murderers and rapists and genociders of Africa, and they got some special relationship with this demon that puts them above the rest of the black folks. What's wrong with people?
Exactly.
They need to stop it.
And from my research, when these Africans who are known as Moors go into Europe, that 800-year occupation of Europe by these Africans,
they were in partnership with the Arabs and later with the Eastern Europeans and the Turks. We never occupied Europe by ourselves. Okay, that's another myth.
Right.
And all the literature will tell you that it was the black people of North Africa and then the Arabs counterpart, because we were not Muslims until the Arabs got there. Voodoo Al-As being the first general to invade North Africa as a Muslim leader, and followed by what gets to be known as the Umayyad dynasty, which will be followed by the what's the dynasty when they get overthrown?
The Almoravids. The
Almoravids. Those are the two black folks that lived there in North Africa. One on the coast, even before the Arabs and the Romans invade, had an invasion of the Visigoths. Coming through Spain. These are the Germans who themselves originated in the same Caucasus Mountains and move as the Ostrogoths down through Eastern Europe and end up in Western Europe as the Visigoths. They invade and occupy North Africa. So with each invasion, you get rape and plundering, and you get a mulattoization of the population on the coast.
Right.
And then there's a war between the Almoravids and the Almoravids, because this is the black population fighting against the mulatto population who had adopted the way of their white enslavers.
Right.
It's very complex. This is not a simple history to explain. It's very complex history.
Yes.
And out of this same mix, you get Hannibal, and some of these same dynamics is already existing.
Absolutely.
You know? And so by the time you get the Roman invasion, let's say it's not, all of North Africa is invaded by the Romans and occupied for hundreds of years before the Arab-Muslim invasion. So the Romans are there raping and plundering and pillaging and mulattoizing the coastal blacks in North Africa from the Atlantic to the Nile. Let's get it right. Let's tell about history so we can work the thing out. But then you got the group of black folks up in the mountains, the Atlas Mountains and other places, who's fighting against this population. And you will find these are the same African Moors who's fighting against being Islamized by the Umayyad dynasty, who comes in, who are mostly Arabs, with Turks as their mercenaries. But the Turks would take over the system from the Arabs in the 8th century, and the Arab would never rule over Islam again. Until the First World War, when the Ottoman Empire is defeated, and the British and the French and the others in North Africa and divided it up between themselves.
Okay, all right.
And in the so-called Middle East. Okay,
look,
and then you... Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Complex history.
Exactly.
In a short time, you know.
Exactly. Do me a favor.
We need to learn history to understand our spirituality.
Absolutely. Okay, look, we're out of time, unfortunately. But tell people how they can go to your website. Yeah, give them your website address. Give them your website address.
Professor James Small, AfricanWorld.com.
Right, and you also have Prof. James Small, AfricanWorld.com also.
World.
Yeah, Prof. James Small, AfricanWorld.com. Can they get your DVDs there at your website?
Yes, sir. But let's make sure that they're going to be coming to 838 Cascade Avenue, Southwest Atlanta, Georgia, on February 14th at 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. See me and Professor Griff try to lay this out in a succinct way so that we can get some unity among us instead of dividing ourselves by all of us having a different aspect of white supremacy as our identity.
Absolutely. Well, look, we're going to try to get you back on the show maybe next Wednesday to continue this discussion, man, because this is a fantastic discussion. We need more time. Check out his website. He's on Facebook as well. Is it Prof. James Small on Facebook? Prof. James Small, I think, on Facebook. Okay.
No, just James Small.
James Small. Okay, look, brother, you have a good night. I'm out of time. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, brother. Hotep. Peace and love. Okay, you've been listening to the Michael Imhotep show on the Empowerment Radio Network, where knowledge is power. Come to the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History